Hello again. We begin chapter 11 of Chaos of Cults by Karel von Baalen, the Reformed theologian. He's dealing here with the biggest of the groups that are generally regarded as cults in North America anyway, and that is Mormonism. Mormonism has been so successful in growing and in a kind of affiliating itself with American institutions outside its own church that sometimes it escapes being grouped with cults nowadays. But in those days, Van Baalen, the 1940s through the 1960s, of course, was telling you what the consensus was about what the great cults were. Mormonism was growing exponentially then and has grown far more exponentially since. What makes it a cult, though, you might ask, if you're coming from the Mormon background? Well, the cults are, that's why he chose this title, actually, The Chaos of Cults, because the cults are united in what they oppose, Christendom. They're divided in what they affirm, that is, an affirmation. So they're united in opposition to Christendom, they're divided in affirmation of doctrinal beliefs. Why is that? It's a very strange phenomenon that I noted even when I was a Jehovah's Witness. Anyway, let's get to von Baalen's analysis. First of all, he wants to make the point that they are a charming people. He says, we are taking quite a leap. We are leaving the isms, which have been more or less directly influenced from the East or from Europe. We are bidding farewell to the out-and-out pantheistic cults, although there are many more. We are turning to isms of a Simon Pure American make. Among these, Mormonism, Seventh-day Adventism, and Rosicrucianism are perhaps the most persistent propagandists. Hence, we intend to devote considerable attention to these three. Mormonism is a marvelously composite faith. It has developed over a period of time, and as it went along, it took over some of the most divergent elements from other sects and groups. They brewed, to speak with Mr. Ferguson, a synthetic religion in Utah. Then the subhead, a charming people. There is an imposing story of Mormonism's accomplishments that makes not only good reading, but cannot fail to arouse admiration. It is the story of how, all before their first centennial, the Mormons have not only encircled the globe, but with their missionaries donating a year or two of their youthful lives, they've also succeeded in blotting out the dark record of early Mormon antisocial doings in Illinois and Missouri. These amazing Mormons have indeed come near to approaching the ideal state. Their cooperatives in matters socio-religious have yielded astonishing fruit. In war or depression, no Mormon becomes a burden upon the state. No help from the national capital is accepted. By means of a strictly enforced sense of stewardship, which does not only involve money, but also physical and mental faculties, an unemployed man may hold his head as high as the captain of industry, for does not his donated labor fill the warehouses and the granaries of Zion, from which in time of distress all will receive the just rewards of their former labors. Enormous business enterprises such as the U&I, that is Utah and Idaho sugar industry, with its sugar beet fields and refineries throughout western states, are all under the control of the church's hierarchy. For the church, like the business organizations that it really is headed by a president with a staff of numerous lesser officials with high-sounding titles who not only watch over the moral but also over the business conduct of the citizen members. A high level of family life is maintained, which is, compared with the rest of the nation, remarkably free of juvenile and adult delinquency. Not only religious exercises, in the strict sense of the word, beginning with the celebrated first testimony of small youngsters in Sunday schools, but also dances and other recreational enterprises are sanctioned with a bishop's prayer and made to redound to the increase of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Mormons have indeed the right to ask proudly, can you point me to a better group of citizens, one that has resulted in greater willingness to lend support to education and removal of poverty and disgrace? And fundamentalists, whose uneasy conscience may have occasion to rebuke them for letting Satan have his way with the world, and Calvinists who withdraw from all cooperation with other Christians because we must be separate, may well stop to see the bold attack that is launched under their noses by such groups as Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, who go into all corners of the world to propagate without ever a fear that they might lose their distinctiveness. Only a vigilant and aggressive Christianity, one that has the promise of the life that now is and of the life that is to come, can successfully oppose the mushroom growth of these movements. And such a Christianity is all the more necessary today, since Unitarianism/modernism has so misplaced the emphasis as to make the average man think that the best Christianity is that society which, regardless of religious doctrine, improves the lot of man upon the earth and maintains a high standard of economic and personal ethics. Here, obviously, Mormonism succeeds. Since, however, Christianity is supposed to be a salt, retarding corruption, a leaven that permeates, and a light that shines in darkness, and since only the Christ according to the Scriptures is the light of the world, Mormonism must stand condemned. It is not only guilty of many crimes in its earlier history, but for all its sociological improvements, it is guilty of the two cardinal sins of our time. First, it identifies the kingdom of God with a here and now social utopia. And secondly, it fosters the essentially pagan idea that salvation is by works rather than of grace. Next time he gets into the history. I'm putting a link this time to Slaves of Men. We have a series called Slaves of Men based on a document you can find on our website, onewonders.org. I'll put in the first of those videos, and the links are at the end. And also the Cults and Propaganda playlist, which is very extensive. See you next time.